Only 2 movies left. Wish me luck. Today's movie is Tim Burton's Alice in Wonderland. Now we've come to possibly the most divisive entry in our journey through Wonderland, the love it or hate it box office smash hit, Tim Burton's Alice in Wonderland. This film tends to garner pretty strong reactions. Mainstream film critics gave it mixed reviews, and internet personalities of the time tended to hate it pretty viciously. And yet, it was one of the highest grossing films of 2010, and audiences really seemed to enjoy it. Why does this film garner such strong reactions? Well, the choice of director has a lot to do with it. Tim Burton is a true cinematic visionary. His style, though clearly taking inspiration from Edgar Allan Poe, Vincent Price, and German Expressionism, has become so iconic that it's instantly recognizable. His films are dark, twisted, macabre, and beautiful. They're about outsiders, freaks, and weirdos seeking to be accepted by a society of normal people who are often more monstrous than the misunderstood protagonists. Tim Burton's films touch a very specific nerve with people who often feel left out of the mainstream, yet connect with enough of the mainstream to be profitable. I say enough of the mainstream because there are a few groups that really hate Tim Burton films, although their reasons vary. The first group is conservative parents from the 80s and 90s who called his films demonic or harmful to kids. Back in 1992, a lot of parents weren't happy with how violent, sexual, and often disgusting Batman Returns was. This led to McDonald's stopping their Happy Meal tie-in and Tim Burton being replaced by Joel Schumacher for Batman Forever. Others think that Tim Burton's films have gotten too formulaic and that he's lost his edge over time, particularly with his reimaginings. Sleepy Hollow, Planet of the Apes, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, and Dumbo enjoyed lukewarm critical reception despite being relatively profitable. But the people who loved Tim Burton really loved Tim Burton. You know the types: goths, artists, teens, horror fans, anyone who feels alienated. But his films also touch on universal emotions that speak to both people who look like Edward Scissorhands and his pastel-colored neighbors. However you feel about Tim Burton and his other works will most likely inform how you'll feel about his take on Alice in Wonderland. People who really enjoy the books and the 1951 version often don't like this film, but there are those who don't have a strong attachment to either, and they tend to like it. What do I think of it? I don't think it's among Burton's best work, not by a long shot, but I enjoyed it a lot more than I thought I would, despite it having a lot of cliches in it that I hate. I know that doesn't make a lick of sense. By all accounts, I should hate this film, but I don't. What's up with this contradiction?
There's been some debate about that.
Okay, so let's start at the beginning. One of the big points of contention about this film is the story. Despite what the title would lead you to believe, Tim Burton's Alice in Wonderland is actually a sequel to the original story, rather than a simple remake or reimagining. Alice, whose last name in this version is Kingsley, is now 19 and set to be married to an aristocratic doofus who doesn't understand love, or much of anything. She's plagued by dreams of a fantastical land filled with talking animals. Oh, but they're not just dreams, they're actually repressed memories.
It wasn't a dream at all. It was a memory. This place is real.
Oh, and guess what? Alice's arrival was foretold in the Great Prophecy because she's destined to slay the monster known as the Jabberwocky. Okay, so besides those two crucial storytelling elements being infuriatingly cliched, Tim Burton's version is a linear hero's journey story. Granted, hero's journey stories are so foundational to the very nature of storytelling itself that they're almost unavoidable, but a hero's journey story that's this prototypical comes across as weird when it's set in a fantasy world like Wonderland, which is supposed to be free from logic. That's one of the key elements that the 1951 animated version got right. It wasn't the darkest version that we've looked at, but it was certifiably insane in its humor, style, characterizations, and pacing. It preserved the nonsensical spirit of Wonderland and how unhinged its inhabitants are. The Tim Burton version doesn't feel like an Alice in Wonderland adaptation. It feels like an adaptation of Lewis Carroll's poem Jabberwocky with the Wonderland characters sprinkled in. Too late, Burton. Terry Gilliam already beat you to it. The juxtaposition of that kind of story but starring these characters is strange, and not in the usual ways that characterize Wonderland. But why this creative decision, you may ask? Well, it's important to note that Burton is not a screenwriter. This adaptation was written by Linda Wolverton, who wrote a few scripts for some obscure movies like, I don't know, Beauty and the Beast, Homeward Bound, The Incredible Journey, The Lion King, and Maleficent. So, yeah, a real lightweight. One of the most important things that Linda Wolverton believes in is creating strong female characters.
Strong, independent woman.
Yeah, one of those. To quote Wolverton herself, a strong female character means somebody who is proactive in their world, who affects their world, isn't a victim, even victimized by it, or, if they are victimized by it, they take action to change that for themselves. They look at the world in interesting ways, maybe another way than the culture does. That makes a strong woman if she's vocal about it, or even goes about trying to make change without being vocal about it. There are so many interesting ways to describe women besides just strong, even this pure difficult strength. It's strong-willed. Looking at it through that lens, this version of Alice fits Wolverton's conception of a strong female character. She doesn't conform to the dress or behavior codes of Victorian society, and has a strong sense of self-determination.
I had a sudden vision of all the ladies in trousers and the men wearing dresses.
It would be best to keep your visions to yourself.
Attitudes which were not encouraged at the time. Her sense of self-determination helps guide her through Wonderland.
Your crimes against Underland are worthy of death.
Oh, wait, I'm sorry, Underland. And keep her relatively unfazed throughout the whole process. She has to dig down deep within herself to find the courage to slay the Jabberwocky and ultimately return to the real world, even stronger and more self-determined than she was before. But you could also make the argument that this approach makes her less interesting than her 1951 animated counterpart.
Really?
Alice Kingsley is self-determined from the beginning.
And no stockings.
I'm against them.
But you're not properly dressed.
Who's to say what is proper?
The worst you can say about her situation is that she's entering what's intended to be an arranged marriage, her beloved father is dead, she feels directionless and unsure of what to do with her life, and she's an insomniac. Those are bad things to be sure, but her willingness to speak her mind about her situation even before going on her journey of self-discovery leads us to believe that she probably would have come to those conclusions anyway. There isn't that much contrast between the before and after versions of herself in order for her character arc to be as meaningful as Wolverton intended. Meanwhile, animated Alice was also self-determined and didn't fit in, but the conflict came from Alice wanting to live in a world without rules. But upon finding herself in a logicless world, she inevitably tries to navigate it using the logic that she was running away from in the first place, thus maturing without even realizing it. Plus, despite her being intelligent and capable, animated Alice was still a little girl lost in a world full of lunatics who were yelling at her or trying to kill her. That's more than enough conflict right there, and plenty of fertile ground for character development. Whether you enjoy one version or another depends on what you're looking for. Are you looking for a be careful what you wish for story, or a hero's journey story?
There's been some debate about that.
For me personally, I think animated Alice was heroic, but in a less obvious, more clever way that was truer to the spirit of the book. But I will say, Mia Wasikowska is great in the title role. She not only looks the part of Alice as a young woman, but has, as Tim Burton himself put it, a rich internal life that just radiates onto the screen. The true magic of Wasikowska's performance comes out when she isn't speaking. She has a luminosity, curiosity, and infectious imagination present in her every glance and expression. That's absolutely Alice.
You're absolutely Alice. I'd know you anywhere.
Hey, I just said that! Despite Mia Wasikowska having been a relative newcomer, this film has a lot of Tim Burton regulars, both in front of and behind the camera. Johnny Depp, Helena Bonham Carter, Alan Rickman, Timothy Spall, Christopher Lee, Michael Gough, costume designer Colleen Atwood, Danny Elfman on the score, and many more. Burton fanboys will inevitably love seeing his regulars, but there will be just as many people shouting, "Work with new people, Tim!" I have to admit, I've fallen into both camps at different times in my life. As is typical with Tim Burton films, Alice in Wonderland excels in the visual department. The makeup, the costumes, the designs of the creatures and environments are all top-notch. The green screen compositing mostly holds up, although some shots are more obvious than others. I like the dark and overcast look of Underland. It communicates a world of insanity insanity and dread that distinguishes it from Oz and reminds us that the book's original manuscript was called Alice's Adventures Underground. So as much as I make fun of it, the changing of the name Wonderland to Underland isn't as strange as it may first appear. So despite the mixed critical reception, the odd choices with adaptation, and some other things I pointed out that don't entirely work, what Tim Burton and company put together obviously worked for a lot of people. This film pulled in over $1 billion worldwide at a time when that wasn't the expectation for every big blockbuster movie. What's more, it helped to launch a new wave of remakes of animated Disney classics, for better or for worse. It helped that Disney marketed the crap out of this movie.
Merchandising! Merchandising! Where the real money from the movie is made.
And not just to kids, but especially teenagers and young adults with the help of stores like Hot Topic. I distinctly remember frequenting Hot Topic back in the day. Between this movie and Twilight, the goth clothing outlet that used to resemble a dungeon and fill parents with unimaginable fear slowly turned into the harmless, inoffensive internet pop culture store. Hot Topic used to mean something, damn it! Your enjoyment of this film will depend heavily on your feelings on Tim Burton, your feelings on the source material, and your love or hatred of prophecy stories and heroes' journeys. For me personally, I think Tim Burton's Alice in Wonderland is very flawed, very cliched, and it's nowhere near Tim Burton's best film. I should hate this film because of all these problems and how much it misses the point of Alice in Wonderland, and yet, for some reason, I don't. In fact, I have some weird kind of nostalgia for it. I saw it in theaters at Downtown Disney when I was at Disney World for the first time in my life, so I can't help but have very fond memories of seeing this film. It was a magical time, and it was a fitting movie to see when I was at that magical place. So my recollections of this film will always be through rose-colored glasses to some degree. Rose-colored 3D glasses, I should say. Looking at it objectively, Tim Burton's Alice in Wonderland is nowhere near the best adaptation of the story, but rest assured, it is a masterpiece compared to the horrors that would be visited upon us a mere 6 years later. His will is strong, but it's breaking. Soon it will shatter and this realm will be mine. Yeah. Yeah.